Hey, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, whatever it may be, wherever you're at in the world. Thanks for joining me here. Um, Episode 2 in the Atlantean series. Better late than never. Um, this is going to be a bit of a transitional, introductory, both article into a book that we're going to get into later on down in my channel's time frame. One of my favorite books changed the whole way I look at Atlantis and connected a lot of dots in my research. Probably top 10 books from a historical perspective and top 3 books when it comes to Atlantis. Yeah, time is precious, and I appreciate every one of you being here. And to my members who are getting early access to this series, thank you so much. It means everything to me. And to those of you seeing these videos further down the line, thank you as well. So, yeah, let's just hop right into this one. Time is precious today. I have very little of it, and I don't want to waste yours. So, here we go. This is Washington, D.C., the Evening Star, 1929. Background of events. I just love that title. I think it's fantastic, and you'll see why as we jump into the actual book, Queen Moo. Um, yeah, lots of correlations here. So again, if you're new to my material, look back through some of my video series, and you can follow me on Twitter. I have tons of my Atlantean posts on there. If you haven't seen any of my collab videos with Dr. Longo, Old World Florida on YouTube, check them out. We go into quite detail about the Gulf of Mexico being the true Fertile Crescent and the original habitation or one of the remnant habitations of Atlantis. So, yeah, we're going to jump right in here. 4 new old cities discovered in one day in Terra Incognita by Colonel Lindbergh. That's Charles Lindbergh as well. So keep that in mind. Okay. The things he was doing with his dirigible and the things he was exploring and seeing, we'll get into that further down in my YouTube channel history as time permits and it correlates a little bit more. But yeah, can anyone imagine a more incongruous combination that of searching the habitations of the ancients of the Yucatan with a modern airplane and beholding from the clouds the ruins of a city so buried in vegetation that it had never before been seen by a white man? That was yesterday's report by radio broadcast from the skies over the interior of the Yucatan Peninsula by a party of explorers headed by Colonel Charles Lindbergh and wife, including certain scientists. Incidentally, when the great winged airplane monster swooped over the savage region, natives were as frightened as we would be upon the appearance of an expedition from the planet Mars, soaring in a comet with a tail entwining the moon. The fascinating nature of the Yucatan wonder lies in the unlimited scope they give the imagination. There is nothing that is impossible in the history of the civilization of the race which outshone all the races in the Western Hemisphere and dazzled the civilization of Europe with every achievement in science and architecture and organization. It is the style to underrate the story of Queen Moo by Dr. Lepongeon. He was not a technical scientist, and many of his deductions as to the location of the Garden of Eden in the Mayan country are scoffed at in the universities and museums. The romantic story of the reigning queen who married her brother is discounted by modern archaeologists. That spouse was slain by another brother in jealousy and envy, and then Queen Moo was driven into flight by that murderer, so that she barely escaped with a small following to the great empire of Atlantis, and subsequently passed on to Egypt, where she was recognized as a queen and made the first queen ruler over Egypt. Then Atlantis blew up or was flooded by the Atlantic Ocean, and Queen Mu never returned to the Yucatan. Before her flight, she had embalmed the heart of her brother husband, and Dr. Le Plongeon found it as is and sent it to Harvard to prove his story. Harvard analyzed it and found it flesh. But Le Plongeon is not endorsed, even when he discovers Mayan hieroglyphics in the Isles of the Pacific and around the world, proving the location of the Garden of Eden in Maya and the former existence of Atlantis. What if Colonel Lindbergh now discovers the original snake and apple tree as he looks down from the ubiquitous airplane? This is a great age of discovery. Nothing he tells us can beat his first noted stunt with "we" and the sandwiches. Getting down to plain facts, take the story by our own highly credited Dr. William H. Holmes of the National Museum, who, with a company of noted scientists, including Dr. Le Plongeon, visited that region more than 3 decades ago and explored its wonders. What then? What he then wrote of its remains, a classic to this day. In an introductory paragraph, Dr. Holmes wrote, "We are told by the early Greek historians that a broad continent known as Atlantis once spread over what is now the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. That this land was inhabited by a vigorous and cultured race of people who carried their arms eastward to the farthest limits of the Mediterranean, and that the Greek gods, righteously angered by these encroachments, retaliated by sending Atlantis to the bottom of the sea. It has been a favorite theory of many students that the American races have been derived from this source, inheriting therefrom the germs of that strange culture now represented by so many ruined cities. Whatever may be the truth with respect to the disappearance of the one continent, it is a curious fact that another land has risen from its watery bed. We are able to clearly show by the aid of geology that a large part of the great block of terra firma, now known as Yucatan, is a newborn realm. The massive beds of limestone of which the peninsula is formed contains and are largely made up of the remains of the marine forms of life now flourishing along its shores. Just like Florida, fossil shells obtained from the rocks in various parts of the country are all of living species and represent late Pliocene and Pleistocene, Pleisto and Plio, thus possibly bringing the date of the elevation of the Yucatan down to somewhat near that reputed sinking of Atlantis. Some 11 or 12,000 years ago, are not far from the period that witnessed the oscillations attending to the close of the glacial period. While Dr. Holmes wrote this dissertation on the geology of the Yucatan some 30 years ago, it seems freshly confirmed by the more recent and accepted theories of isostasy, based upon the idea that every section of the surface of the Earth, while in equilibrium, must exactly balance in weight every other section of equal area. Hence, if the continent of Atlantis sank, it must have result in the rising of another adjoining area. And so came the rising of the Yucatan out of the sea, or above its former level, being pushed upward by the flow of rocks 60 or 75 miles below the surface when Atlantis sank. Dr. Holmes continues. He cites the fact that there are few surface streams in Yucatan, but many underground streams. And he adds, but a strange thing has happened to fit this land for habitation. As time passed by, the roots of the underground streams were perforated in places by the process of disintegration and caving in, and yawning sinks were formed, in the bottoms of which could be seen pools of darkening water. In the midst of the forest, the traveler comes suddenly upon these great cistern-like pits leading down into the bowels of the earth. Many are irregular in outline and section, taking the character of caverns, but others are so round and evenly walled as to be taken for works of art. There are often 100 feet or more in depth and 200 or 300 feet in diameter. And in some cases, the water cannot be reached save by ropes or ladders, while in others, portions of the walls have fallen in, giving steep pathways down to the water's edge. From these unique reservoirs, the water supply of the ancient nations was almost exclusively obtained. Into this strange new land some thousand or more years ago, pioneers of the red race gradually found their way, and taking possession of the great wells, built themselves habitations. One of the most famous of the ruins of Yucatan is called Chichen Itza. The Mayan word for well is Chichen. So Chichen Itza means the well of the tribe of Itza, one of the several Mayan tribes. The two general impressions is that the Mayans are today an extinct race. Dr. Holmes records, at the period of the conquest of the Mayan tribes occupying the peninsula of the Yucatan and considerable portions of neighboring territory to the south and west, are said to have comprised in the neighborhood of 2 million souls. Today, they are distributed over nearly the same area, but are reduced in numbers. It is estimated to less than 500,000, at least, of whom continue to speak the Mayan tongue in its purity. What makes the Mayan race so interesting is the evidence of its ancient, very high development in architecture. mm, Sorry about that. In architecture and science, the ornamentation of their buildings was classic in design, recalling Greek and Egyptian figures. They built massive pyramids of masonry equal in size to the Great Pyramids of Egypt, but far more ornate. Their temples are marvels of construction and of beauty, not surpassed in the world to this day. Their masonry, done without metal instruments of any kind, was massive, intricately carved, and symmetrically built. While they did not know the principles of the arch, they made Masonic archways by projecting layers of stone and cutting the openings as wanted, even with the shape of an inverted trefoil doorway, suggesting Moorish design. Again, the overlays here are powerful. Um, they built massive pyramids of masonry, as we stated earlier. The classic in design recalling Greek and Egyptian figures, as we stated. Inverted trefoil doorway, suggesting Moorish design. And even further, some of the roots of the languages here: Etruscan, Arabic, Aramaic, Hebrew, and what they call Paleo Chinese. Very interesting. Their ornamentation of masonry of the facades of great stone temples often betrayed a knowledge of the fundamental principle of art. Repetition of conventional design with variation of detail. Aside from their art was their marvelous knowledge of astronomy and of the divisions of time, far more exact than the Copernican system, yet without Galileo's telescope to aid them in observing the planets. They oriented their buildings exactly to the main points of longitude and latitude, and they created observation orifices in their walls, great distances apart, which caught the rays of the sun and certain stars only at the solstice or other vital moments of annual observation. By gazing through two of these far divided orifices, the observer got the effect of a telescopic, sorry. Whether they originated in Asia or Africa or Europe, or were the forefathers of the world, the Mayas were the mental equals of any race on earth. Their ruins today dot their wilderness, and the tropical overgrowth alone hides marvels unknown to the most determined explorers. What additional wonders are destined now to be unlocked by the use of airplanes above the tangled vegetation of the Yucatan? Yeah, and as we know, we're only beginning to find out. Well, that's not necessarily true. The governments have known for a long time. LIDAR's been around for a long time, and but the LIDAR is slowly making its way into the public realm, and we're really getting uh, a clear vision of just how massive and intricate, and the populace of these cities must have been absolutely astronomical, huge, billions of people. Similar story to tracing all the way through Alaska in my Anomalous America episodes, all the way. Here we are. Episode tomorrow, 6/6, is going to be Louisiana, and we're going to get into Atlantean relations there as well. So, but yeah, episode 2 of the Atlantean series here. Um, thank you, my members, and for those who are watching further down the road, thank you as well. Appreciate you guys. Stay tuned for more. Have a wonderful day.